The fist hit the door so hard the frame cracked. "Open this door right now or I'm coming through it." The voice outside wasn't just angry. It was layered with something darker, something that made the hair on Emily Carter's neck stand straight up. She stood frozen in her studio apartment, still wearing her scrubs from a 16-hour shift at Ravenwood Memorial. Blood on her sleeve from a stabbing victim, coffee stains down her front. Her hands were still shaking from compressions on a kid who didn't make it. And now this. "I said open up!" Another slam. The deadbolt rattled. Emily's combat medic training kicked in before her exhausted brain could catch up. Threat assessment, exit routes, weapons within reach. "Identify yourself first," she called back, voice steadier than she felt. Silence. Then, "You know exactly who I am." But she didn't. And that's when Emily realized this wasn't a wellness check. This wasn't a noise complaint. This was something far worse. She had no idea that in the next 72 hours she would dismantle a predator, expose a conspiracy, and force an entire city to confront the monster they'd been protecting. If you want to see how one nurse's refusal to open a door brought down a corrupt system, stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And hit subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Emily's phone was already in her hand, screen unlocked, recording app open. Muscle memory from too many late-night shifts where patients got violent and lawyers got involved. She tapped record and set it on the kitchen counter, lens aimed at the door. "I need you to state your name and badge number," she said through the door. "You trying to be difficult?" The voice shifted, less official now, more personal. "Just open the door. Not until you identify yourself." A pause. Then a different tone entirely. "Emily Carter, 29 years old, works night shift at Ravenwood Memorial, lives alone." Her stomach dropped. He knew her name, her age, her schedule. "How do you know that?" she asked. "I know a lot of things." There was a smile in his voice now. "Like how you got home 20 minutes ago. Like how nobody's coming to check on you." Emily's mind raced. She'd parked in the basement garage, taken the elevator, hadn't seen anyone in the hallway. Her nearest neighbor was Mrs. Brennan, 83 and mostly deaf. "Last chance," the man said. "Open the door or I open it for you." Emily pulled her phone from her pocket with her other hand and dialed 911. 2 rings. Then, "Ravenwood Emergency Services, what's your emergency?" "There's someone at my door claiming to be police but refusing to identify himself. He's threatening to break in." She kept her voice low but clear. "I'm at 447 Ashford Street, apartment 3C. The dispatcher's fingers clattered across a keyboard. "Can you describe this person?" "I can't see him. He won't show ID through the peephole." More typing. Then the dispatcher said something that made Emily's blood go cold. "Ma'am, we don't have any units dispatched to that address, and we haven't received any calls about a disturbance there." The pounding stopped. Emily stepped closer to the door, peered through the peephole. Empty hallway. Whoever had been there was gone. "He just left," Emily said. "Do you want us to send a unit to check the area?" "Yes, please." "Officers are en route. Estimated arrival 6 minutes. Stay on the line with me." Emily's hands were shaking now. She pulled a chair from her tiny dining table and wedged it under the doorknob, something her drill sergeant had taught her in basic. Then she grabbed the biggest knife from the block on the counter. "Can you tell me what he said to you?" the dispatcher asked. Emily replayed it in her head. The threats, the personal information, the way he'd said her name like he'd been practicing it. "He knew things about me," Emily said. "My name, my job, my schedule, things you don't just guess." "Did he claim to be law enforcement?" "He didn't say it directly, but he acted like he had authority." The dispatcher went quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, I'm noting that in the report. Officers will want to speak with you when they arrive." Emily sat on the floor with her back against the wall, knife across her lap, phone in one hand, and the recording still running on the counter. 6 minutes felt like 6 hours. When the knock came, it was different. Professional. 3 measured raps. "Ravenwood PD. Ma'am, we're responding to your 911 call." Emily looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers. One older, gray at the temples. One younger, sharp-eyed and alert. Both had their badges clearly visible. She opened the door but kept the chain on. Emily Carter? The older officer asked. That's me. I'm Sergeant Hayes. This is Officer Morales. Dispatch said you had someone at your door making threats? Emily nodded. About 10 minutes ago, he wouldn't identify himself, but he knew my name, where I work, my schedule. Then when I called 911, he took off. Hayes and Morales exchanged a look. Did you see him? Morales asked. No, he stayed out of view of the peephole. Did he say he was a cop? Not exactly, but he acted like one. The way he was talking, like he had authority. Hayes pulled out a notepad. Can you walk us through exactly what he said? Emily recounted it word for word. The threats, the personal details, the way his voice had shifted from official to something else. When she finished, Morales was frowning. And you didn't recognize the voice? Never heard it before in my life. Hayes glanced down the hallway. Any of your neighbors have security cameras? Mrs. Brennan across the hall might, but she's hard of hearing, probably didn't hear any of this. We'll check with her. Hayes closed his notepad. You did the right thing calling us. If he comes back, call 911 immediately. Don't open the door for anyone unless you can verify who they are. I won't. Morales handed her a card. That's the non-emergency line. If you remember anything else, or if anything feels off, call that number and ask for me directly. Emily took the card. Thank you. After they left, she locked the door, reset the chair, and sat on her couch staring at the wall. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond the double shift. She should sleep. She had another shift in 12 hours. But every time she closed her eyes, she heard that voice. You know exactly who I am. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Emily went to the precinct. She'd barely slept, running on coffee and spite. But she needed answers. The desk sergeant looked up when she walked in. Help you? I need to file a report. Someone impersonated an officer at my apartment last night. The sergeant's expression shifted. You talked to the responding officers? Sergeant Hayes and Officer Morales. They took my statement, but I want it on record officially. Wait here. 10 minutes later, a detective in a rumpled suit appeared, mid-40s, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd seen too much. Ms. Carter, I'm Detective Brennan. Come with me. He led her to a small interview room, windowless, fluorescent lights, a table bolted to the floor. Emily had been in rooms like this before, but usually on the other side. As a forensic nurse, she'd given testimony in dozens of cases: assault, rape, child abuse. She knew how this worked. Brennan sat across from her and opened a folder. Tell me what happened. She went through it again. Every detail. The pounding. The threats. The personal information. The way the voice had changed. When she finished, Brennan leaned back in his chair. You record any of this? Audio and video, the door, the conversation, everything. I'm going to need that. Emily pulled out her phone, sent him the files. Already backed up to 3 separate clouds. Brennan's eyebrow ticked up. Smart. I'm a forensic nurse. I know how evidence works. He watched the video twice, listened to the audio 3 times. When he was done, his jaw was tight. You know what this sounds like? Brennan said. Someone pretending to be a cop. Or someone who is a cop. Emily's stomach clenched. What? The way he's talking, the information he has, the confidence. Brennan tapped the phone. This isn't some random guy playing dress-up. This is someone with access. Access to what? Databases, dispatch logs, personal information. Brennan leaned forward. Did you file any reports recently? Any incidents at the hospital? Anything that would put you in the system? Emily thought back. I testified in a DV case 3 months ago, treated the victim in the ER, documented her injuries, gave a deposition. Defendant's name? Marcus Rowe. He was convicted, sentenced to 8 years. Brennan made a note. Anyone connected to that case have a grudge against you? His brother showed up at the hospital once, tried to intimidate me. Security escorted him out. Name? Kyle Rowe. More notes. Anyone else? Ex-boyfriends, former coworkers, patients with complaints? No, I keep my head down. I work, I go home, I work again. Brennan studied her. You live alone? Yes. Boyfriend, family nearby? No and no. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to be straight with you. If this is what I think it is, you're not safe. Emily's pulse kicked up. What do you think it is? I think someone with a badge is targeting you. And I think last night wasn't the first time. What do you mean? Brennan pulled a file from his briefcase. In the past 6 months, we've had 4 complaints from women in your neighborhood. Same pattern. Late night knocks, threats, personal information. All of them live alone. All of them work night shifts. Emily felt the floor tilt. And? And every single one of them reported it, but nothing ever came of it. The complaints disappeared, no investigations, no follow-up. Why? Brennan's expression darkened. Because someone buried them. Emily left the precinct with more questions than answers. Brennan had told her to be careful, to vary her routine to install better locks. He'd also told her something else. If this happens again, record everything. Don't trust anyone in uniform until we figure out who's behind this. She went home, triple-locked the door, and pulled up the building's security footage on her laptop. The building manager had given her access months ago after someone slashed tires in the garage. Most people didn't know the cameras were there. She scrolled back to the previous night. 10:47 p.m. Her car pulling into the garage. 10:51 p.m. Her entering the building. 10:54 p.m. The elevator doors closing. Then, at 11:03 p.m., a man appeared in the hallway outside her apartment. Emily's breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He stood outside her door for 30 seconds, just staring at it. Then he raised his fist and pounded. The footage had no audio, but Emily could see his mouth moving. The threat she'd heard through the door. At 11:09 p.m., he pulled out his phone, glanced at it, and walked away. Fast. Like he knew something. Emily rewound the footage, zoomed in on his face. The cap shadowed most of it, but she could see his jawline, the set of his shoulders. And then, just for a second as he turned, the edge of something clipped to his belt. A badge. Emily screenshotted the frame, enhanced the image, sent it to Brennan with a single message. Found him. Brennan called her back within 5 minutes. Where did you get this? Building security footage? Can you send me the full file? Already done. There was a pause. Then Brennan said, Emily, I need you to listen carefully. Don't go to work tonight. Don't follow your normal routine. Stay somewhere public. Stay around people. Oh, why? What's going on? Because I just ran facial recognition on that screenshot. His voice was tight. The man at your door is Officer Daniel Reeves, 15 years on the force, decorated, respected. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. So what do we do? We build a case, but until we do, you stay safe. Understood? Understood. She hung up and stared at the frozen image on her screen. Officer Daniel Reeves. A decorated cop. A predator hiding behind a badge. And he knew where she lived. Emily didn't go to work that night. She called in sick, first time in 2 years, and checked into a motel on the other side of the city. Small, run down, cash only. The kind of place where nobody asked questions. She paid for 3 nights and locked herself in room 12. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brennan. Stay put. We're pulling Reeves's service records and search history. If he accessed your info through the database, we'll find it. Emily texted back. How long? 48 hours. Maybe less. She set the phone down and stared at the water-stained ceiling. 48 hours. 2 days of hiding while they built a case against a cop who'd been terrorizing women for months, maybe years. Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time, unknown. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Silence. Then that voice. The one from the door. You made a mistake, Emily. Her blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? I told you. I know everything about you. A pause. And you just made this a lot worse for yourself. The line went dead. Emily's hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. She called Brennan immediately. He just called me, threatened me. What number? She read it off. I'm tracing it now. Did he say anything else? Just that I made a mistake, that I made it worse. Brennan swore under his breath. He knows you're building a case. Someone tipped him off. What do I do? You stay exactly where you are. I'm sending a unit to sit outside your motel. Plain clothes. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Brennan, you're not alone in this, Emily. We're going to get him. She wanted to believe that, but as she sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the locked door, she couldn't shake the feeling that Reeves was always one step ahead, and that terrified her more than anything. The next morning, Brennan called. We got him. Emily sat up so fast her vision blurred. What? Reeves accessed your personal file through the police database 14 times in the past month. Your address, your work schedule, your vehicle registration, everything. Is that enough? It's a start. We're also pulling his phone records, cross-referencing with the other complaints. If he contacted those women, we'll find it. And then? And then we arrest him. Emily exhaled for what felt like the first time in 24 hours. When? Soon. But Emily, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to testify. When this goes to trial, your footage, your testimony, it's going to be the cornerstone of the case. I'll do it. Good. Because we're not just taking down Reeves, we're taking down everyone who covered for him. 3 days later, Daniel Reeves was arrested. Emily watched it on the news from her motel room. Footage of him being led out of the precinct in handcuffs, head down, surrounded by officers who used to call him a brother. The anchor's voice was grim. Officer Daniel Reeves, a 15-year veteran of the Ravenwood Police Department, has been charged with multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and unlawful use of a law enforcement database. Authorities say Reeves targeted at least 7 women over the past 18 months, using his position to access their personal information and intimidate them in their homes. 7 women. Emily's hands clenched into fists, 7 women who'd been too scared to fight back. Until now. Her phone buzzed. Brennan, it's done. He's in custody. You can go home. But Emily didn't feel relief. She felt rage. Because Reeves wasn't the only one responsible. Someone had buried those complaints. Someone had looked the other way. Someone had let a predator hunt for 18 months. And Emily was going to make sure every single one of them paid. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Emily walked into the courthouse in a crisp blazer and slacks, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked like exactly what she was, a professional who'd been through hell and refused to break. Reeves sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. When Emily walked past, he didn't look at her. Coward. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Ortiz, approached Emily in the hallway before the hearing started. You ready? Ortiz asked. I've testified in worse cases. Good, because his lawyer is going to try to discredit you. They'll say you overreacted, that you misunderstood, that Reeves was just doing his job. Let them try. Ortiz smiled. I like you. Inside the courtroom, Emily took the stand. Reeves's lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man named Paul Hendricks, stood and approached. Miss Carter, you've testified in several criminal cases before, haven't you? Yes. And in those cases, you were considered an expert witness? In forensic nursing? Yes. So you're familiar with how the legal system works? I am. Hendricks smiled. Then you understand that police officers sometimes have to make difficult decisions, that they have to knock on doors, ask hard questions, follow up on leads. I do. So when Officer Reeves knocked on your door that night, isn't it possible he was simply following up on a legitimate call? Emily met his eyes. There was no call. You don't know that. Dispatch confirmed it. There was no disturbance reported at my address. No reason for anyone to be at my door. Hendricks waved a hand. Dispatch errors happen all the time. Not like this. But you can't be certain. I can be certain, Emily cut in, that Officer Reeves knew my name, my age, my job, and my schedule before I ever opened my mouth. I can be certain that he accessed my personal information through the police database 14 times without cause. I can be certain that he called my cell phone from an untraceable number and threatened me. So yes, Mr. Hendricks, I'm certain. The courtroom went silent. Hendricks tried to recover. You recorded the interaction, didn't you? I did. Convenient. Smart. A few people in the gallery laughed. Ortiz stood. Your Honor, the defense is badgering the witness. The judge nodded. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Hendricks. But Hendricks had nothing left. Emily stepped down 20 minutes later, and as she walked past Reeves, she saw something in his face. Fear. The case moved fast after that. Reeves's phone records came back showing calls to all 7 victims. His search history revealed months of surveillance, and one of the other women, a bartender named Jessica Moss, came forward with her own recording. The defense crumbled. 2 months later, Daniel Reeves pled guilty to avoid trial. Sentencing, 18 years. Emily sat in the gallery and watched as they led him away. No tears, no relief, just cold, hard satisfaction. But the story didn't end there, because Emily had filed a civil suit against the Ravenwood Police Department for failing to investigate the complaints, for allowing Reeves to hunt, for protecting one of their own at the expense of innocent women. And 3 months after Reeves's sentencing, the department settled. $1.2 million. Emily donated half of it to a women's shelter, used the other half to fund a new protocol at Ravenwood Memorial, mandatory training for ER staff on how to document and report abuse by law enforcement. She also got the department to implement new policies. Body cameras required on all welfare checks, immediate suspension for any officer accused of stalking, independent oversight for database access. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Awesome. 6 months after it all began, Emily stood in her apartment, new locks installed, security system upgraded, pepper spray on her keychain, and stared at the door. The door that had started it all. She could have opened it that night, could have trusted the voice, could have been another statistic, but she didn't. And because of that, 7 women got justice. A predator lost his badge, and a system was forced to change. Emily's phone buzzed. A message from Brennan. Saw the news. They're naming the new protocol after you, the Carter Standard. Thought you should know. She smiled. Not because of the recognition, but because somewhere out there, another woman in another apartment would hear a knock and think twice, would record the interaction, would call 911, would refuse to be a victim, and that woman would be safe, because Emily Carter had shut the door. 2 weeks after Brennan's text, Emily walked into Ravenwood Memorial for her night shift and found her locker had been keyed. Deep scratches carved through the blue paint, forming words she could barely make out in the dim light of the staff room. She leaned closer. Snitch. Her jaw tightened. She'd expected this. Reeves had friends on the force, and not all of them had been caught yet. The settlement had made headlines. The Carter Standard had been implemented citywide, and every cop who'd ever cut corners or looked the other way now saw her as the enemy. Jesus, Em. She turned. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, still in his paramedic uniform, eyes wide at the damage. They'd worked together for 3 years. Good guy, solid medic, never asked too many questions. It's fine, Emily said. That's not fine. You report this? To who? Security? She grabbed her stethoscope from the locker, ignoring the scratches. They'd file it and nothing would happen. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know people are talking, right? Let them talk. I'm serious. Some of the guys in the ambulance bay, they're saying you went too far. That Reeves was just doing his job and you railroaded him. Emily slammed her locker shut. Reeves stalked 7 women. He used his badge to hunt people. If that's doing his job, then the job's broken. I know. I'm just saying, watch your back. She met his eyes. I always do. Marcus left, and Emily stood alone in the staff room, staring at the scratched metal. She could file a complaint, could demand cameras in the locker room, could make noise, but she'd learned something in the past 6 months. Making noise didn't always make you safer. Sometimes it just painted a bigger target on your back. She pocketed her stethoscope and headed to the ER floor. Friday night in Ravenwood meant the usual chaos. Overdoses, stabbings, domestic calls, car wrecks. The kind of shift where you didn't think, you just moved. By midnight, Emily had treated a gunshot wound, a broken jaw from a bar fight, and a 60-year-old woman having a heart attack. She was charting notes at the nurse's station when Dr. Richard Calloway appeared beside her. Calloway was the kind of doctor who made everyone uncomfortable. Mid-50s, impeccable suits under his white coat, a reputation for brilliance that barely masked his contempt for nurses. He didn't yell or throw things like some of the older attendings. He just made you feel small. "Carter," he said, without looking at her. "Bed 7 needs a catheter." Emily glanced at the board. Bed 7 was a 52-year-old man with kidney stones. Stable, not urgent. "Stevens is covering that section," Emily said. "I'm asking you." "I'm charting a code blue from 20 minutes ago. Stevens can handle it." Calloway finally looked at her. "Are you refusing a direct order?" Emily set down her pen. "I'm prioritizing critical patients over routine procedures. That's my job." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Your job is whatever I say it is. Actually, my job is defined by my scope of practice and the nursing board. Not you." The nurses' station went quiet. 2 other nurses pretended to be very interested in their computers. Calloway leaned in slightly. "You've gotten bold since your little victory lap in the news." "I testified in a criminal case. That's not a victory lap." "You destroyed a man's career." "He destroyed his own career when he decided to stalk women." Calloway's jaw tightened. "Reeves was a good cop. He made mistakes, sure, but he didn't deserve what you did to him." Emily stood up slowly, meeting him eye to eye. "He threatened me in my own home. He terrorized 6 other women. He abused his power for 18 months while people like you looked the other way. So yeah, Dr. Calloway, he got exactly what he deserved." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Calloway smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Careful, Carter. You're making a lot of enemies." He walked away, leaving Emily standing at the nurse's station with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. One of the other nurses, a younger woman named Lisa Park, glanced over. "That was stupid." "Probably," Emily said. "Calloway's connected. His brother-in-law is a city councilman. He could make your life hell." "He already is." Lisa shook her head and went back to her charting. Emily sat down and tried to focus on her notes, but her mind was racing. Calloway had just told her something important, even if he didn't realize it. Reeves was a good cop. Present tense, not past. Like Reeves was still out there somewhere. But he wasn't. He was in a federal prison 300 miles away, serving 18 years. Wasn't he? Emily pulled out her phone and texted Brennan. "Is Reeves still locked up?" The reply came fast. "Why?" "Just answer the question." A pause. Then, "Yes. Why?" Emily stared at the screen. If Reeves was locked up, why did Calloway talk about him like he was still active? Still part of the department? Unless Calloway wasn't talking about Reeves at all. Unless he was talking about the others, the ones who hadn't been caught yet. Emily deleted the text thread and pocketed her phone. She needed to focus. She had 6 more hours on shift and 3 patients waiting for labs. But as she walked toward the supply room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something worse than a keyed locker or a hostile attending. Something that would force her to decide just how far she was willing to go. The shift ended at 7 a.m. Emily clocked out, grabbed her bag from the keyed locker, and headed to the parking garage. The morning sun was just starting to break over the skyline, turning the clouds orange and pink. Beautiful, if you weren't too exhausted to notice. She was halfway to her car when she saw it. All 4 tires slashed. Emily stopped dead. The parking garage was empty except for a few scattered vehicles. No cameras in this section. She'd checked months ago. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit her. She pulled out her phone to call a tow truck, then hesitated. If she reported this, it would go into a police report. And right now she didn't trust anyone in uniform. Instead, she called Marcus. "Yeah?" He sounded half asleep. "I need a ride." I just got home. Someone slashed my tires." A pause. "Where are you?" "Hospital garage, level 3. Stay put, I'm coming." 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled up in his beat-up Honda. He got out, took one look at her car, and swore under his breath. "You call the cops?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust them." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "This is getting out of control." "I know. You can't keep living like this, looking over your shoulder, wondering who's going to come after you next." Emily threw her bag in the back seat. "What do you want me to do? Roll over? Pretend it didn't happen?" "I want you to be safe." "I am safe. I'm careful. Careful doesn't stop someone from slashing your tires. She climbed into the passenger seat. Just drive. Marcus didn't argue. He pulled out of the garage and headed toward her apartment in silence. When they arrived, Emily scanned the street before getting out. Everything looked normal. No strange cars, no one loitering, just the usual early morning quiet. "Thanks for the ride," she said. Marcus nodded. "You need anything? Call me." "I will." She watched him drive away, then headed inside. Triple locked the door, drew the blinds, made coffee she didn't drink. Then she sat on her couch and pulled out her laptop. If Calloway and his friends wanted to intimidate her, fine. She'd been intimidated before. But if they thought she'd back down, they didn't know her at all. Emily opened a secure browser and started digging. She pulled up Calloway's employment records, public information, accessible through the hospital's board filings. He'd been at Ravenwood Memorial for 12 years. Before that, he'd worked at a private clinic in the northern part of the city. Before that, a residency at Columbia. Nothing unusual. But when Emily cross-referenced his name with court records, something interesting popped up. 3 years ago, Calloway had been named in a malpractice suit. A patient, a woman named Angela Torres, had accused him of performing an unnecessary surgery and then covering it up when complications arose. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Emily dug deeper. Angela Torres had died 6 months after the settlement. Cause of death: infection secondary to surgical complications. And the lawyer who'd represented her? Paul Hendricks. The same lawyer who'd defended Daniel Reeves. Emily's pulse kicked up. She pulled up Hendricks' case history. Over the past 5 years, he'd represented dozens of cops accused of misconduct. He'd also represented doctors in malpractice suits, city officials in corruption cases, and business owners in fraud investigations. Hendricks wasn't just a defense attorney. He was a fixer. And if Calloway and Reeves both used the same fixer, that meant they were connected. Emily screenshotted everything and sent it to Brennan with a single message: "We need to talk." Brennan called her within the hour. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Public records, court filings, it's all legal." "Emily, you need to stop digging." "Why?" "Because you're poking a hornet's nest. Hendricks has connections all over the city. If he finds out you're looking into his clients, he'll what? Slash my tires? Key my locker? Threaten me in a parking garage?" Emily's voice was sharp. "That's already happening, Brennan. So unless you've got a better idea, I'm going to keep digging until I find out who's behind this." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Meet me tomorrow, noon, the diner on 5th and Maple." "Why there?" "Because it's public. Because it's neutral. And because I have something to show you." He hung up before she could ask what. Emily set the phone down and stared at the screenshots on her laptop. Calloway, Hendricks, Reeves, 3 men connected by a web of corruption that ran deeper than she'd realized, and she was about to pull the whole thing down. The next day, Emily arrived at the diner 10 minutes early. She sat in a booth by the window, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and watched the street. Brennan showed up at noon exactly, carrying a manila folder. He slid into the booth across from her and didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at her like he was deciding something. "You look terrible," he finally said. "Thanks. When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep." "Bullshit." He pushed the folder across the table. "Open it." Emily did. Inside were police reports, dozens of them, all filed in the past 3 years, all involving women who'd reported harassment, stalking, or threats from men in positions of power: cops, doctors, lawyers, city officials. And all of the reports had been closed without investigation. "Jesus," Emily whispered. "That's just Ravenwood," Brennan said. "I pulled records from 3 other precincts. Same pattern. Complaints filed, cases closed, no follow-up." "Who's closing them?" "That's the problem. There's no single person. It's coming from different supervisors, different departments. But they're all connected to one man." "Hendricks." Brennan nodded. "He's not just a defense attorney. He's running interference. When a complaint gets filed, he makes a call. The case gets reassigned. The paperwork disappears. The victim gets discouraged and drops it." Emily's hands tightened on the folder. "How many women?" "In Ravenwood alone? At least 30, probably more." 30 women. 30 women who'd been silenced, intimidated, erased. Why are you showing me this? Emily asked. Brennan leaned forward. Because I need your help. I've been trying to build a case against Hendricks for 2 years, but every time I get close, something happens. Witnesses recant. Evidence disappears. My captain tells me to back off. So what do you want me to do? I want you to testify, not just about Reeves, about the whole system, about how they buried complaints, how they protected abusers, how they let predators operate for years. Emily stared at him. You want me to go after the entire department. I want you to go after the people who let this happen, the supervisors who ignored complaints, the lawyers who made them disappear, the officials who looked the other way. That's a lot of powerful people, Brennan. I know. They'll come after me. They already are. Emily looked down at the folder. 30 women, 30 stories like hers, 30 reasons to fight. When do we start? She asked. Brennan smiled. Now. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily and Brennan worked in secret. He fed her case files. She cross-referenced names, dates, patterns. They met in parking garages, coffee shops, parks, anywhere public enough to be safe but private enough to talk. And slowly, a picture emerged. Hendricks wasn't just defending bad cops. He was running a network. When someone in power got accused of misconduct, whether it was a cop, a doctor, a city councilman, Hendricks stepped in. He buried the complaint. He intimidated the victim. He made sure the case never saw daylight, and in return, those men protected him. It was a perfect system. Until Emily broke it. She'd found something Brennan had missed. A woman named Claire Dawson, who'd filed a complaint against a city councilman for sexual harassment. The case had been closed within a week, but Claire hadn't given up. She'd hired her own lawyer, filed a civil suit, and won a settlement. And in the process, she'd documented everything. Emails, phone records, transcripts of conversations with supervisors who'd told her to drop it. Claire had kept it all. Emily tracked her down through social media. Claire was living in Seattle now, working as a paralegal. When Emily called, Claire was hesitant at first. I moved on, Claire said. I don't want to rehash all of that. I understand, but there are other women still dealing with this, women who don't have the resources you had, women who need someone to speak for them. A long pause. What do you need? Claire asked. Everything you have, emails, phone records, transcripts, anything that shows how they buried your case. And if I give it to you, what happens? We take them down. Claire was quiet for a moment, then, send me a secure email address. I'll upload the files tonight. Emily hung up and immediately texted Brennan. Got a witness. She's sending files. Who? Claire Dawson, sued a city councilman 3 years ago. Brennan's reply was fast. Holy shit, that case was sealed. How did you find her? I'm good at my job, clearly. That night, Claire's files arrived. Hundreds of pages. Emails from supervisors telling her to drop the complaint. Phone records showing calls between Hendricks and the police captain. Transcripts of depositions where officials lied under oath. It was everything they needed. Emily sent it all to Brennan, then sat back and waited. 2 days later, the news broke. Federal investigators had opened a probe into the Ravenwood Police Department and the city attorney's office. They were looking into allegations of systemic corruption, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. And at the center of it all was Paul Hendricks. Emily watched the press conference from her apartment. The U.S. attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Victoria Grant, stood at a podium and spoke in clipped, precise sentences. We have credible evidence that multiple officials in Ravenwood conspired to bury complaints of misconduct in order to protect their colleagues and associates. We are committed to holding those individuals accountable. A reporter shouted a question. Can you confirm that Officer Daniel Reeves's case is connected to this investigation? Grant didn't hesitate. Yes. Officer Reeves' conviction was the first thread. We're now pulling the entire tapestry. Emily's phone buzzed. A text from Brennan. You watching this? Yeah. You did this. We did this. No, you did. Don't downplay it. Emily set the phone down and exhaled slowly. She'd spent 6 months being careful, watching her back, avoiding conflict. But now the conflict had found her, and she was ready. The backlash was immediate. Within 24 hours, Emily's name was leaked to the press. Not officially, no one at the U.S. Attorney's Office would confirm it, But somehow, reporters knew she was involved. Her phone rang constantly. Journalists wanting interviews, producers wanting her story, activists wanting her to speak at rallies. She ignored all of it. But she couldn't ignore the messages. Anonymous texts, emails from burner accounts, voicemails that were just breathing. You're going to regret this. Snitches don't last long in this city. Watch your back. Emily reported every single one to Brennan. He forwarded them to the FBI. But the messages kept coming. And then, one night, someone tried to break into her apartment. Emily was asleep when she heard it. The scrape of metal on metal. Someone picking the lock. She was out of bed in seconds, phone in hand, pepper spray in the other. She stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and waited. The lock clicked. The door started to open. Emily didn't hesitate. She hit the panic button on her phone, connected directly to Brennan's number, and shouted through the door. "I've got a gun and I've already called the police. You've got 5 seconds to leave." She didn't have a gun, but whoever was on the other side didn't know that. A pause. Then footsteps. Fast, running. Emily locked the door, reset the deadbolt, and shoved a chair under the handle. Then she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and waited for Brennan. He arrived 10 minutes later with 2 uniformed officers. They swept the building, found no one, but discovered scratches on her lock that confirmed someone had tried to pick it. "You're not staying here tonight," Brennan said. "I'm not running. This isn't running. This is staying alive." Emily wanted to argue, but she was too tired. "Where do I go?" "Safe house, federal protection, until we finish the investigation." "How long?" "However long it takes." Emily packed a bag and left with Brennan. The safe house was a small apartment in a nondescript building on the edge of the city. 2 agents were assigned to her, one at the door, one in the lobby. It felt like a cage. But it was better than being dead. For 3 days, Emily stayed in the safe house and watched the news. The federal probe was expanding. More names were being leaked. City officials, police supervisors, even a judge who'd dismissed multiple misconduct cases. And through it all, Paul Hendricks stayed silent. No press conferences, no statements, just a terse no comment from his office. On the 4th day, Brennan visited. "We got him," he said. Emily looked up from the couch. "Who?" "Hendricks. The FBI raided his office this morning, seized his files, his computers, everything. And they found proof. Emails coordinating with officials to bury cases. Payment records showing he'd been compensating witnesses to recant. Even recordings of phone calls where he threatened victims." Emily felt something loosen in her chest. "So it's over." Brennan hesitated. "Not quite." "What do you mean?" "Hendricks isn't going down alone. He's cutting a deal, giving up names in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Who?" "Everyone. Cops, supervisors, city councilmen, even—" He stopped. "Even who?" Emily pressed. Brennan met her eyes. "Even Dr. Richard Calloway." Emily's breath caught. What did Calloway do? He was part of it. When patients filed complaints against doctors at Ravenwood Memorial, Calloway would call Hendricks. Hendricks would make the complaints disappear. In exchange, Calloway provided medical testimony in Hendricks' cases, fake diagnoses, exaggerated injuries, whatever Hendricks needed to win. Emily's hands clenched into fists. "That bastard! He's being arrested tomorrow." "Good." Brennan stood. "There's something else." "What?" "The U.S. Attorney wants you to testify at the grand jury hearing, not just about Reeves, about the whole system." Emily didn't hesitate. "When?" "Next week." "I'll be there." The grand jury hearing was held in a secure federal courthouse. Emily arrived early, escorted by 2 agents. The courtroom was small, windowless, filled with jurors who looked more tired than interested. Victoria Grant, the U.S. Attorney, approached Emily before she took the stand. "You ready?" Grant asked. "Yes." "They're going to ask hard questions about Reeves, about Hendricks, about the department. Don't hold back." "I won't." Emily took the stand and told them everything. The night Reeves came to her door, the threats, the database searches, the trial, the settlement. And then she told them about the others, the women who'd been silenced, the complaints that had disappeared, the system that had failed them. When she finished, the room was silent. One of the jurors, A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse raised her hand. "Miss Carter," she said, "why did you keep fighting, even when it put you in danger?" Emily looked at her. "Because someone had to." The grand jury returned indictments against 14 people. Paul Hendricks, Dr. Richard Calloway, 3 police supervisors, a city councilman, 2 judges, and 5 others who'd been part of the network. It was the largest corruption case in Ravenwood's history, and Emily was at the center of it. The day the indictments were announced, Emily sat in the safe house and watched the news. Hendricks being led out of his office in handcuffs. Calloway surrounded by reporters shouting questions. The police chief resigning in disgrace. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't." Emily stared at the message. Then she screenshot it, sent it to Brennan, and blocked the number. She'd stopped being afraid a long time ago. Now she was just angry. And anger, Emily had learned, was a far more useful emotion. 2 days later, Emily was cleared to leave the safe house. The immediate threats had subsided. Most of the people who'd been after her were now behind bars or under investigation. She returned to her apartment, triple-locked the door, and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come, because at 3 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" A voice she didn't recognize. Male. Calm. "Emily Carter? Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you did, and someone who's going to make sure you pay for it." The line went dead. Emily sat up in bed, heart pounding. She'd taken down Reeves. She'd exposed Hendricks. She'd dismantled a network of corruption. But somewhere out there, someone was still watching, and they weren't done with her yet. Emily didn't call Brennan this time. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in her hand, and made a different call. One she'd been avoiding for months. The line rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Garrison." "It's Emily Carter." A pause, then, "Didn't think I'd hear from you again." Lieutenant Frank Garrison had been Emily's commanding officer when she'd served as a combat medic in Afghanistan. He'd retired 5 years ago, moved to Ravenwood, started a private security firm. They'd kept in loose touch, Christmas cards, occasional texts, but nothing substantial. Until now. "I need help," Emily said. "What kind?" "The kind that involves people who want me dead." Another pause. "You at your apartment?" "Yes." "Stay there, I'm 20 minutes out." He hung up. Emily set the phone down and walked to the window. The street below was empty, no cars, no movement. But that didn't mean anything. Whoever had called her knew where she lived, knew her schedule, knew exactly how to get to her, just like Reeves had. 18 minutes later, headlights swept across her window. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Frank Garrison stepped out, 6'3", barrel-chested, moving like someone who still did PT every morning despite being 62 years old. Emily buzzed him up. When she opened the door, Frank didn't waste time on pleasantries. He walked past her, scanned the apartment with the practiced eye of someone who'd cleared rooms in Fallujah, then turned to face her. "Talk," he said. She told him everything, the call, the threat, the fact that 14 people had been indicted but someone was still out there. Frank listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me. I need a trace on a number." He rattled off the digits from Emily's call log. "Priority. Call me back in 10. He hung up and looked at Emily. "You armed?" "Pepper spray." "That's not armed." He pulled a compact Glock from his waistband, checked the chamber and set it on her kitchen counter. "You know how to use one of these?" "I qualified expert in the service." "Good. Keep it close." "Frank, I can't just—" "You can and you will. Someone threatened your life. That means the rules changed." Emily stared at the gun. She'd carried one in Afghanistan, had qualified on the range every 6 months, but she hadn't touched a firearm since her discharge. "I don't want to shoot anyone," she said quietly. "You won't have to. But if they think you're armed, they'll think twice." His phone rang. He answered, listened, then his expression darkened. "You sure?" A pause. "Yeah, thanks." He hung up and looked at Emily. "The number's a burner. Activated yesterday, used once, then deactivated. Can't trace it." "So we've got nothing." "We've got something. Whoever called you is smart. They're not using their own phone, not leaving a trail. That means they're either law enforcement or they've been trained by law enforcement. Emily's chest tightened. You think it's someone from the department? I think it's someone who knows how the department works. Could be a cop. Could be a Fed. Could be someone with enough money to hire professionals. Hendricks. Frank nodded. He's in custody, but that doesn't mean he can't make calls. And based on what you told me about his network, he's got plenty of people who owe him favors. Emily sank onto the couch. So what do I do? You disappear. I already tried that. The safe house didn't work. Because you went where they expected you to go. This time you go somewhere off the books. Somewhere nobody knows about. Where? Frank pulled a set of keys from his pocket. I've got a cabin 2 hours north. No lease, no paper trail. Paid cash 15 years ago. Nobody knows about it except me and my ex-wife, and she's in Florida. I can't just leave. I have a job, a life. You'll have a funeral if you stay here. Emily wanted to argue, but she couldn't because Frank was right. How long? She asked. Until Brennan figures out who made that call. A week, maybe 2. And if they don't figure it out? Frank's expression hardened. Then we handle it a different way. Emily packed a bag. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop, the Glock Frank had given her. She texted Brennan from a burner phone Frank provided, told him she was going dark for a while, and not to try to contact her. Then she climbed into Frank's SUV and they drove north. The cabin was exactly what Frank had described. Small, isolated, surrounded by pine trees and accessible only by a dirt road that barely qualified as navigable. No neighbors within 5 miles, no cell service, no internet. Perfect. Frank helped her unload, showed her where the generator was, where the well pump connected, how to use the wood stove. You'll be safe here, he said, but don't get comfortable. Check the perimeter twice a day. Keep the gun within reach. And if you see anyone, you call me on the sat phone. He handed her a bulky satellite phone that looked like it belonged in a museum. This thing still works? Emily asked. Better than your iPhone. Battery lasts a week and it can't be traced. He left an hour later and Emily was alone. She spent the first day just settling in, unpacking, familiarizing herself with the layout, testing the locks. By the second day, the isolation was starting to get to her. No noise except wind through the trees, no people, no distractions, just her thoughts. And her thoughts were dangerous. She kept replaying the phone call, the voice, the calm, measured threat. Someone who knows what you did, and someone who's going to make sure you pay for it. Who was it? Hendricks was in custody. Calloway was awaiting trial. Reeves was locked up. The supervisors, the councilmen, the judges, all of them were either arrested or under investigation. So who was left? Emily pulled out her laptop and opened the files Brennan had sent her months ago. The complaints, the cases, the network. She'd been so focused on the big players, Hendricks, Calloway, Reeves, that she'd missed something. There were names in the files that had never been charged, people who'd been mentioned in depositions but never called to testify, witnesses who'd recanted, officials who'd transferred to different departments right before investigations started. Emily started making a list. Deputy Chief Martin Cross, transferred to the county sheriff's office 3 months before the federal probe began. Assistant City Attorney Laura Voss, resigned 2 weeks after Hendricks' arrest, citing personal reasons. Dr. Nathan Kirby, Calloway's former partner at Ravenwood Memorial, left the hospital and opened a private practice in the suburbs. And then there was one more name. One Emily had seen before but never connected. Captain Gregory Monroe. He'd been Reeves's direct supervisor. He'd signed off on Reeves's commendations. He'd been named in 2 of the buried complaints as someone who'd discouraged victims from pursuing cases. But Monroe had never been indicted. Emily pulled up his employment record. He was still active duty, still working at the Ravenwood PD, still in a position of power. She grabbed the sat phone and called Frank. Yeah? I found something. What? A name. Captain Gregory Monroe. He was Reeves's supervisor. He's mentioned in multiple complaints, but he was never charged. Frank was quiet for a moment. You think he's the one who called you? I think he's connected, and I think Brennan missed him. Send me what you have. I'll run it through my contacts. Emily uploaded the files to a secure server and sent Frank the link. Then she waited. 3 hours later, Frank called back. "Monroe's dirty," he said without preamble. "How dirty?" "Dirty enough that half the department knows it, but nobody talks about it. He's been covering for bad cops for over a decade. Reeves wasn't the first, won't be the last." "Why wasn't he indicted?" "Because he's careful. He doesn't leave a paper trail, doesn't send emails, doesn't make calls from his own phone. Everything he does is face-to-face, off the record." Emily's grip tightened on the sat phone. "So how do we prove it?" "We don't. The feds do. But they need evidence, and right now, they don't have any." "Then I'll get it." "Emily, I'm not hiding in the woods while this bastard walks free. You go after Monroe, you'll end up dead." "I'll end up dead if I don't. At least this way I take him with me." Frank sighed. "You always were stubborn." "I learned from this best." A pause. Then, "What do you need?" "A way to make Monroe come to me." Emily spent the next 2 days planning. She couldn't go after Monroe directly. He was too well protected, too connected. But she could force him to make a move. She drafted an email, short, direct, sent it from an anonymous account to every major news outlet in Ravenwood. "Captain Gregory Monroe of the Ravenwood PD has been protecting corrupt officers for over a decade. I have evidence. Contact me for the full story." She didn't sign it, didn't leave contact information, but she knew Monroe would see it, and she knew he'd come for her. The email hit the news cycle within 12 hours. Every station ran with it. The headlines were predictable. "New allegations against Ravenwood PD federal probe expands to include Captain Monroe whistleblower. Claims evidence of systemic cover-up." Monroe's response was immediate. He held a press conference, stood in front of a wall of microphones, and denied everything. "These allegations are baseless and defamatory," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "I have served this department with integrity for 23 years. I will not be intimidated by anonymous accusations." Emily watched the press conference from the cabin. Monroe looked calm, composed, but there was something in his eyes. Fear. Good. That night, Emily's sat phone rang. "It's Brennan. What the hell are you doing?" "My job." "Your job is to stay alive, not to paint a target on your back." "The target's already there. I'm just making sure Monroe knows I'm armed." "Emily, Monroe is dangerous. If you go after him, he'll come after me first. I know." "And you're okay with that?" "No, but I'm done running." Brennan was quiet for a long moment, then, "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe." "I need to know where you are so I can send protection." "I've got protection. His name is Frank Garrison, and he taught me how to clear a room before you graduated the academy." Brennan swore under his breath. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe, but Monroe's going down first." She hung up before he could argue. 2 days later, Monroe made his move. Emily was chopping firewood behind the cabin when she heard it. The faint sound of an engine in the distance. Too far to see, but close enough to hear. She dropped the axe, grabbed the Glock from her waistband, and moved toward the front of the cabin. A black sedan appeared at the end of the dirt road. Moving slow, deliberate. Emily ducked behind a tree and watched. The sedan stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. The driver's door opened. Captain Gregory Monroe stepped out. He was alone. No backup. No tactical gear. Just a suit and a sidearm holstered at his hip. "Emily Carter," he called out. "I know you're here. Let's talk." Emily stayed behind the tree, gun raised, finger off the trigger, but ready. "Talk from there," she shouted back. Monroe smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You've made a lot of noise, Emily, caused a lot of problems." "Good. You think you're a hero, but you're just a woman who doesn't know when to quit." "Funny, people keep saying that, but I'm still here and Reeves is in prison." Monroe's smile faded. "Reeves was careless. I'm not." "So why are you here?" "To offer you a deal." Emily laughed. "You've got to be kidding." "I'm serious. You drop the allegations, you disappear, and I make sure nothing happens to you." Or I make sure something does." Emily stepped out from behind the tree, gun still raised. "You threatened me at my apartment. You threatened me on the phone. Now you show up here. You really think I'm going to take a deal from you?" Monroe's hand drifted toward his holster. "Don't," Emily said sharply. I've got center mass. You've got a 40% chance of drawing before I fire. You want to take those odds? Monroe's hand stopped. You won't shoot me, he said. Try me. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Monroe's expression shifted, less confident, more calculating. You think you've won, he said, but you haven't. Hendricks is cutting a deal. Calloway's singing like a canary. And every single person they name is going to point fingers at each other until the whole case falls apart. That's not how federal prosecutions work. You'd be surprised. I testified at the grand jury. I've seen the evidence. You're going down, Monroe. The only question is how many people you take with you. Monroe's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. You came here alone. A new voice cut through the clearing. She's not alone. Monroe spun around. Frank Garrison stepped out from the tree line, rifle in hand, aimed directly at Monroe's chest. Lieutenant Garrison, Monroe said slowly. Captain, Frank's tone was flat. Drop your weapon. I'm a police officer. You're a dirty cop standing on private property threatening a civilian. Drop your weapon. Monroe hesitated. Then he reached for his holster. Emily didn't think. She fired. The shot hit the ground 2 feet in front of Monroe. Dirt and gravel exploded upward. Monroe froze. Next one's in your knee, Emily said. Then your shoulder, then your gut. I'll keep you alive long enough for the feds to arrest you, but you'll wish I hadn't. Monroe raised his hand slowly. You're going to regret this. I doubt it. Frank moved forward, keeping his rifle trained on Monroe. He pulled the captain's sidearm from its holster, checked the chamber, and tossed it into the woods. On your knees, Frank said. Monroe didn't move. Frank fired a shot into the dirt next to Monroe's foot. Monroe dropped to his knees. Frank zip-tied his hands behind his back, then pulled out his phone and called Brennan. Yeah, it's Garrison. I've got a gift for you. He rattled off the cabin's coordinates. Better bring the feds. This one's going to need federal charges. He hung up and looked at Emily. You good? Emily's hands were shaking. She lowered the gun, engaged the safety, and nodded. Yeah, I'm good. Brennan arrived 90 minutes later with 2 FBI agents and a federal marshal. They took Monroe into custody, read him his rights, and loaded him into an unmarked car. Before they left, Brennan pulled Emily aside. You know what you just did? He asked. Saved my own life? You just handed us the last piece. Monroe's going to flip. He's going to give up everyone he's been protecting, every dirty cop, every corrupt official, every asshole who thought they were untouchable. Emily exhaled slowly. Good. You should have called me. I did. After it was over. Brennan shook his head. You're reckless. I'm alive. He couldn't argue with that. After they left, Emily and Frank stood in the clearing watching the sun set through the trees. You okay? Frank asked. I will be. That was a hell of a shot, 2 feet in front of him. On purpose? Emily smiled faintly. I told you. I qualified expert. Frank laughed. Yeah, you did. They went inside and Emily made coffee while Frank secured the perimeter. For the first time in months, she felt something close to safe. But the feeling didn't last. Because 3 days later, Frank got a call from one of his contacts. Monroe had been found dead in his cell. Apparent suicide. Hanged himself with a bedsheet. Emily stared at Frank when he told her. You believe that? Hell no. Someone got to him. Yeah. Who? Frank set his coffee down. Whoever's left, whoever Monroe was protecting. Emily felt the anger rise again. So we're back to square one. Not quite. Monroe's lawyer filed an emergency motion before he died, turned over a USB drive with files Monroe had been keeping as insurance, names, dates, recordings, everything. Where's the drive now? FBI has it. They're going through it. And? Frank hesitated. And one of the names on that drive is someone you know. Emily's stomach dropped. Who? Dr. Nathan Kirby, Calloway's former partner, the one who'd left Ravenwood Memorial and opened a private practice. What did he do? Emily asked. According to Monroe's files, Kirby was providing illegal prescriptions to cops and city officials. Painkillers, sedatives, stimulants, whatever they needed to keep working, keep quiet, keep compliant. He was drugging them. Yeah, And when someone threatened to talk, Kirby made sure they couldn't. Emily's hands clenched. How? Overdoses, made to look accidental. Monroe's files have 6 cases over the past 4 years. All of them people who were about to testify or file complaints. All of them dead within a week. Emily felt the room tilt. Kirby's a serial killer. The FBI thinks so. They're raiding his practice tomorrow. I want to be there. Emily. I want to be there. Frank studied her, then he nodded. I'll make the call. The raid happened at dawn. Emily stood behind the FBI's mobile command unit, watching through binoculars as agents stormed Kirby's practice. They breached the front door, swept the building, and emerged 20 minutes later with Kirby in handcuffs. He looked smaller than Emily remembered. Mid-50s, graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of man you'd trust with your prescriptions. Not the kind of man who'd killed 6 people. Emily watched as they loaded him into a van. He didn't struggle, didn't protest, just stared straight ahead like he'd been expecting this. One of the FBI agents approached Emily. Ms. Carter? Yeah. Agent Fisher, I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't pushed this investigation, we never would have found Kirby. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, but you have them anyway. Fisher walked away, and Emily stood there watching the van drive off. 6 people dead, 6 families destroyed, all because Kirby wanted to protect a network of corruption. And he would have kept going if Emily hadn't refused to open that door 6 months ago. Later that night, Emily sat in Frank's cabin and watched the news. The arrests were dominating every channel. 14 indictments, 2 suicides, 1 serial killer, and at the center of it all, Emily Carter, the nurse who'd brought down a city. Her phone rang. The burner Frank had given her. She answered. Hello? Silence. Then a voice, different from the one before, older, rougher. You think it's over, it's not. Emily's chest tightened. Who is this? Someone you haven't found yet, someone you won't find. Try me, the voice laughed, cold, humorless. You've been chasing the wrong people, Emily. Reeves, Hendricks, Monroe, Kirby, they were all just pieces. But the person who built the board? The person who made sure it all worked? Emily's pulse kicked up. Who? You'll find out soon enough. And when you do, you'll wish you'd stayed quiet. The line went dead. Emily stared at the phone, hands shaking. She'd taken down 14 people, exposed a network, forced a federal investigation. But somewhere out there, the architect was still free, and they were coming for her. Emily played the recording 3 times before calling Frank. He answered on the first ring. What happened? Another call, different voice. Says I've been chasing the wrong people. You get a recording? Yeah, sending it now. She uploaded the file and waited while Frank listened. When he came back on the line, his voice was tight. That's not a threat. That's a warning. From who? Someone who knows exactly what's happening. Someone inside the investigation. Emily's blood went cold. You think there's a leak? I think whoever built this network didn't get to the top by being stupid. They've got eyes everywhere, including inside the FBI. So what do I do? You trust no one. Not Brennan, not the feds. Not anyone except me. Brennan's clean. He's been helping me from the start. Or he's been watching you, making sure you don't get too close to the real target. Emily wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because Frank was right. She'd been so focused on taking down the people in front of her that she'd never stopped to ask who was behind them. I need to go back to Ravenwood, Emily said. That's suicide. That's the only place I'll find answers. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then, give me 24 hours. I'll put together a team. I don't need a team. Yeah, you do, because if you're right about this, whoever's at the top isn't going to let you walk away. Emily hung up and stared at the dark windows of the cabin. Somewhere out there, the architect was watching, waiting, planning their next move. And Emily was done waiting. She spent the next day going through every file she had, every complaint, every case, every name that had appeared in depositions or testimony. She built a timeline. Reeves had been operating for 18 months before Emily shut him down. But the complaints about him had started 3 years earlier. Someone had been burying them. Hendricks had been defending dirty cops for 5 years. But his connection to the police department went back further. He'd been consulted on internal investigations. He'd advised supervisors on how to handle misconduct cases. Monroe had been covering for bad officers for over a decade, but he'd been promoted 3 times during that period. Someone had rewarded him for his silence. And Kirby had been providing illegal prescriptions for 4 years, but medical board complaints against him had been filed and dismissed repeatedly. Every single thread led back to one question: who had the power to make all of this happen? Emily pulled up the organizational chart for Ravenwood's city government: mayor, city council, police chief, district attorney. She cross-referenced them with the case files. And then she found it. A name that appeared in almost every buried complaint, not as a defendant, not as a witness, but as a signature on dismissal letters: Deputy Mayor Simon Garrett. Emily's hands froze on the keyboard. Garrett had been deputy mayor for 8 years. Before that, he'd been city attorney. Before that, a defense lawyer at a private firm, the same firm where Paul Hendricks had worked. Emily pulled up Garrett's financial records, public information, accessible through campaign disclosures. Over the past 5 years, he'd received donations from dozens of sources: shell companies, PACs, individual donors. But when Emily traced those donations back, they all connected to the same people: Hendricks, Calloway, Monroe, Kirby, and dozens of others who'd been protected by the system. Garrett wasn't just part of the network, he was the network. Emily grabbed the sat phone and called Frank. "I found him." "Who?" "Deputy Mayor Simon Garrett. He's been running the whole thing," Frank swore. "You sure?" "He's signed off on every dismissed complaint. He's taken money from every player in the network, and he's got the authority to make it all disappear." "Emily, if you're right about this—" "I am." "Then you just made yourself the most dangerous person in Ravenwood." "Good. Let him know I'm coming." She hung up before Frank could argue. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She called Brennan. He answered immediately. "Emily, where are you?" "Safe, for now." "The FBI's been looking for you. They want you in protective custody." "I'll bet they do." "Tell me something, Brennan. How well do you know Deputy Mayor Garrett?" A pause. "Why?" "Just answer the question." "I've met him a few times. He's attended some community policing events." "Why?" "Because he's the one running the network. He's been protecting dirty cops and corrupt officials for years, and I'm going to prove it." Brennan's voice dropped. "Emily, listen to me very carefully. Do not go after Garrett. He's got connections at every level of government. If you accuse him without ironclad proof, I have proof. Financial records, signatures on dismissal letters, connections to every player we've already taken down." "That's circumstantial. You need direct evidence. Recordings, communications, something that ties him to specific crimes." "Then help me get it." "I can't. The FBI's running point on this now. If I go rogue, I'll blow the whole investigation." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "So what do I do?" "You stay hidden. You let the feds do their job, and you trust that justice will happen." "I trusted that for 6 months, and Monroe still ended up dead in his cell." "Someone got to him, Brennan. Someone inside the system. And my money's on Garrett." Brennan didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was strained. "If you're right, then going after him will get you killed." "Maybe, but sitting here doing nothing definitely will." She hung up. 20 minutes later, Frank called back. "I've got a team, 3 guys, all former military, all people I trust with my life." "When can they be ready?" "They're already en route. We're meeting you at the cabin tomorrow morning." "What's the plan?" "We go to Ravenwood, we get evidence, we get out. And if Garrett's people find us, then we make sure they regret it." The next morning, Frank arrived with 3 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Mid-30s, fit, calm. The kind of people who'd seen combat and decided they preferred the clarity of violence to the ambiguity of civilian life. Frank made introductions quickly. "This is Hale, Martinez, and Cooper. They've worked with me for 5 years. They're good." Emily nodded. "What's the plan?" Frank spread a map of Ravenwood across the cabin's table. "Garrett's office is in City Hall, 3rd floor, corner office. Security's tight, but not impossible. We've got 2 options. 1, we go in during business hours. Blend in with the crowds. Get to his office, plant surveillance equipment, get out. And option 2? We go in after hours, bypass security, access his computer directly, pull everything we can. Which one's safer? Neither, but option 2's faster. Emily studied the map. When? Tonight. Garrett's got a fundraiser at the Ashland Hotel. He'll be there until at least midnight. Gives us a 4-hour window. What do you need from me? Stay here. Let us handle it. Emily met his eyes. Not a chance. Frank sighed. I knew you'd say that. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Hale ran comms, Martinez handled surveillance. Cooper prepped the entry equipment, and Emily reviewed the building schematics until she could navigate them blindfolded. At 10 p.m., they loaded into Frank's SUV and headed south. The drive took 90 minutes. They parked 3 blocks from City Hall in a lot that didn't have cameras. Then they split up. Frank and Emily approached from the west, Hale and Martinez from the east. Cooper stayed with the vehicle, monitoring police scanners and security feeds. Emily wore all black. No logos, no reflective surfaces, just dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. They reached the side entrance to City Hall at 11:45. Hale was already there, kneeling by the door with a lockpick set. Cameras? Frank asked quietly. Looped. We've got 12 minutes before the system resets. Then move. Hale picked the lock in 30 seconds. They slipped inside and headed for the stairwell. City Hall was empty. Just the hum of HVAC and the distant sound of a janitor's vacuum on the first floor. They reached the 3rd floor without incident. Garrett's office was at the end of the hallway. Corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture visible even through the frosted glass door. Martinez checked the lock. Keycard access. Frank pulled a cloned card from his pocket. Try this. Martinez swiped it. The lock clicked green. They were in. Garrett's office was exactly what Emily expected. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, framed photos of him shaking hands with governors and senators. Awards lining the walls. Emily moved to the desk, pulled open drawers. Nothing unusual, just pens, business cards, a half-empty bottle of scotch. Computer's locked, Martinez said from the desk. Frank pulled out a USB drive. Plug this in. It'll bypass the password. Martinez inserted the drive. The screen flickered. Then the desktop appeared. Emily leaned over his shoulder. Pull up his emails. Martinez navigated to the email client. Thousands of messages, years of correspondence. Search for Hendricks, Emily said. Martinez typed. Dozens of results appeared. Emily scanned them quickly. Most were routine. Meeting confirmations, case updates, nothing incriminating. Then she saw one from 3 months ago. Subject, problem with Carter. Emily's breath caught. Open that. Martinez clicked. The email was short. Paul. The Carter situation is escalating. She's not backing down. We need to contain this before it spreads. I've spoken with Monroe. He'll handle it. Let me know if you need anything else. Emily's hands clenched. He ordered Monroe to come after me. That's not enough, Frank said. We need more. Martinez kept scrolling, then he stopped. Wait. Look at this. An email from 2 weeks ago, sent to an address Emily didn't recognize. Subject, cleanup. The body of the email was a single line. Kirby's been compromised. Make it look like suicide. No loose ends. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Garrett had ordered Monroe's death. Download everything, Frank said. Every email, every file, everything. Martinez plugged in a second USB drive and started copying. Emily moved to the filing cabinet. Locked. She pulled out a small pry bar from her jacket and forced it open. Inside were folders, dozens of them, each one labeled with a name. Reeves, Hendricks, Monroe, Kirby, and dozens more Emily didn't recognize. She grabbed the files and stuffed them into her backpack. We've got company, Hale said from the doorway. Security's doing rounds. 2 guards, headed this way. How long? Frank asked. 2 minutes. We need 90 seconds. Frank looked at Martinez. How much longer? 60% downloaded. Keep going. Emily moved to the window. 3rd floor. No fire escape. just a 30-foot drop to concrete. "We can't go out the way we came in," she said. Frank scanned the room. Then he pointed to a door in the corner. "Service hallway, connects to the back stairwell." Emily tried the door, locked. She forced it with the pry bar. The lock splintered. The door swung open. "Done," Martinez said, pulling the USB drive. "Move," Frank ordered. They slipped into the service hallway just as the security guards entered the main corridor. The hallway was narrow, dark. It smelled like cleaning supplies and old carpet. Emily led the way, moving fast but quiet. The back stairwell was 50 feet ahead. Behind them, she heard a voice. "Office is open, 3rd floor, southwest corner." Footsteps, fast. They reached the stairwell. Emily shoved the door open and they descended 2 floors in seconds. They hit the ground floor and exited through a loading dock in the back. Cooper was waiting in the SUV, engine running. They climbed in and he pulled away before the doors were even closed. "We good?" Cooper asked. Frank nodded. "We're good." Emily leaned back against the seat, heart pounding, backpack full of files clutched to her chest. They'd done it. They had everything they needed to take down Garrett. Back at the cabin, Emily spread the files across the table. Frank and his team stood around her, watching as she sorted through them. Each file contained the same pattern. A complaint filed against someone in power, a notation from Garrett ordering it dismissed, and in some cases, a payment record showing money changing hands. It was a ledger of corruption spanning 8 years. "This is enough," Frank said. "We turn this over to the FBI and Garrett's finished." Emily shook her head. "Not yet." "What are you talking about?" "Garrett's connected. If we hand this to the wrong person, it disappears, just like the complaints." "So what do you want to do?" Emily pulled out her phone. "I want to make sure the whole world sees it." She uploaded the files to a secure server. Then she drafted an email. Recipients, every major news outlet in the state, every investigative journalist she could find, every advocacy group that dealt with police accountability. Subject, Deputy Mayor Simon Garrett and the Ravenwood Corruption Network. Body? Attached are files proving that Deputy Mayor Simon Garrett has been systematically burying complaints of misconduct, protecting corrupt officials, and ordering violence against whistleblowers. This is the full network. These are the receipts. She attached everything, the emails, the financial records, the case files. Then she hit send. "What did you just do?" Frank asked. "I made sure Garrett can't bury this." Within 2 hours, the story broke. Every news station in the state ran with it. The emails, the files, the evidence, and at the center of it all, Emily Carter's name. The nurse who'd brought down an entire city government. Garrett's response was immediate. He held a press conference at 6 a.m., standing in front of City Hall with his lawyer beside him. "These allegations are false and defamatory," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "I have dedicated my career to public service. I will not be intimidated by baseless accusations." But his voice was shaking, and within 12 hours, the FBI announced they were opening a formal investigation. By the end of the day, Garrett had resigned. Emily watched it all from the cabin. Garrett's press conference, his resignation, the FBI agents entering his office and seizing boxes of files. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Because 2 days later, Emily got another call. Same burner number, same calm voice. "You think you won?" Emily didn't respond. "Garrett was a puppet," the voice continued, "a useful idiot, but he was never the architect." "Then who is?" "Someone you've already met. Someone who's been watching you this whole time." The line went dead. Emily stared at the phone. Someone she'd already met. She went back through the files, every name, every face, every person who'd crossed her path in the past 6 months. And then she saw it, a single name that appeared in almost every file but had never been charged, never been questioned, never even been mentioned in the investigation. Assistant City Attorney Laura Voss, the woman who'd resigned 2 weeks after Hendrick's arrest, citing personal reasons. Emily pulled up Voss's employment history. She'd been with the city attorney's office for 12 years. Before that, she'd worked at the same law firm as Hendricks and Garrett. She'd been there from the beginning. Emily cross-referenced Voss's name with the financial records. Shell companies, offshore accounts, payments to every major player in the network. Voss wasn't just part of the system. She'd built it. And then Emily found something else. A property record. A house in Voss's name. Purchased 8 years ago, located on the outskirts of Ravenwood. The same address where Claire Dawson, the woman who'd won her civil suit, had been living when she filed her complaint. Emily's hands started shaking. Voss had known about Claire, had probably been watching her, had let her win the settlement because it was easier than fighting. But Voss had made sure no one else won. Emily grabbed the sat phone and called Frank. I found her. Who? Laura Voss. She's the architect. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then, where is she now? Unknown. She resigned 2 weeks after Hendricks was arrested. No forwarding address, no contact information. I'll find her. Frank, stay at the cabin. I'll call you when I have something. He hung up. Emily sat in the silence of the cabin, surrounded by files and evidence and the wreckage of the network she'd dismantled. She'd taken down Reeves, Hendricks, Monroe, Kirby, Garrett. But Voss was still out there, and she was the one who'd made it all possible. Emily's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're getting close, but not close enough. Emily stared at the screen. Then another message. Check Brennan's financials. Emily's blood ran cold. She pulled up Brennan's public records, bank statements, property records, tax filings. And there it was. A payment. $50,000. Deposited into Brennan's account 3 months ago. From a shell company owned by Laura Voss. Emily felt the world tilt. Brennan, the man who'd helped her build the case, who'd protected her, who'd promised her justice. He'd been on Voss's payroll the entire time. Emily's hands clenched into fists. She grabbed her laptop and started digging deeper. More payments, dating back 2 years, always from different shell companies, always just under the reporting threshold. Brennan had been feeding Voss information, telling her who was getting close, who needed to be silenced, and he'd been using Emily to do it. Every name she'd given him, every file she'd shared, he'd passed it all to Voss, and Voss had used it to stay one step ahead. Emily called Frank. Brennan's dirty. What? He's been working for Voss, taking payments, feeding her information. He's been playing me this whole time. Frank swore. Where is he now? I don't know. But if Voss knows I'm on to her, she'll tell him, and he'll come for me. Pack your gear. I'm coming to get you. No time. If Brennan knows where this cabin is, he doesn't. Only I know about that place. You sure? A pause. Then, yeah, I'm sure. But Emily heard the doubt in his voice. She hung up and grabbed the Glock from the table. Then she heard it. The sound of tires on the dirt road. Emily moved to the window and looked out. 2 cars. Black sedans. Headlights off. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Doors opened. 4 men stepped out, all armed. And at the front of the group, Detective Brennan. Emily's hands tightened on the gun. She'd trusted him. And he'd been the enemy all along. Emily killed the lights and moved away from the window. Her mind raced through options. The cabin had 2 exits, front door and back door. Both would be covered within seconds. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed the laptop and files inside, and moved to the bedroom. There was a crawl space under the floorboards. Frank had shown it to her on the first day. Emergency escape route. Emily pried up the boards and dropped into the darkness below. The space was tight, maybe 3 feet high. She pulled the boards back over her head just as she heard the front door splinter open. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving through the cabin. Clear the rooms, Brennan's voice. Calm. Professional. Emily crawled through the dirt, navigating by memory. The crawl space ran the length of the cabin and opened into a drainage culvert about 30 yards into the tree line. She could hear them above her. Opening closets. Checking under the bed. Methodical. She was here recently, someone said. Coffee's still warm. Check outside. She couldn't have gone far. Emily reached the end of the crawl space. A metal grate blocked the exit. She pushed. It didn't budge. Rusted shut. Behind her, she heard boots on the floor directly above. Emily braced her feet against the dirt wall and shoved with both hands. The grate groaned, then gave. She tumbled out into the culvert, scrambled to her feet, and ran. The forest was pitch black, no moon, no stars, just trees and darkness and the sound of her own breathing. Behind her, shouts. Movement! Southwest corner! Flashlight beams cut through the trees. Emily ran harder. She knew these woods, had walked them every day for 3 days. There was a service road half a mile east. If she could reach it, a branch cracked to her left. Emily dove behind a fallen log just as a flashlight beam swept over her position. "I've got tracks," someone called. "Heading east." Emily stayed low, counted to 10, then moved. She stayed off the main path, moving through the underbrush, slower but quieter. The service road was close now. She could hear traffic in the distance. Another 20 yards. 10. She broke through the tree line and onto the gravel shoulder. A pair of headlights appeared around the curve. Emily stepped into the road, waving her arms. The car, a beat-up pickup, screeched to a stop. An older man leaned out the window. "You okay?" "I need a ride. Now." He looked at her. Dirty, bleeding from a cut on her arm, eyes wild. "Get in." Emily climbed into the passenger seat. "Drive." He didn't argue. As they pulled away, Emily looked back. Flashlight beams were emerging from the tree line. Too late. "Where you headed?" the man asked. "Ravenwood. That's an hour from here. I'll pay you." He glanced at her again. "You in trouble?" "Yeah." He nodded and pressed the gas. They drove in silence for 20 minutes before Emily's sat phone rang. "Frank." She answered. "I'm okay. Where are you?" "In a truck. Heading to Ravenwood." "Brennan?" "He came to the cabin. I got out." Frank exhaled. "Thank God. Listen, I found Voss." Emily sat up straight. "Where?" "Portland. Living under a different name, Sarah Kendall. She's renting a condo downtown." "You sure it's her?" Facial recognition confirmed it. "But Emily, there's something else." "What?" "I ran her financials. She's been moving money, lots of it. Offshore accounts, shell companies. She's planning to run." "When?" "Today. She's got a flight to Mexico City at 6 p.m. Emily checked the dashboard clock. 4:17 a.m. "I can make it." "Emily, you can't go after her alone." "I'm not. You're meeting me there." "I'm 3 hours away. Then drive fast." She hung up and looked at the driver. "Change of plans. I need to get to Portland." He whistled. "That's another 2 hours. I'll pay you $500. He glanced at her. "Cash?" "Cash." "Deal." They arrived in Portland at 6:43 a.m. The driver dropped Emily 2 blocks from the address Frank had sent. She paid him, grabbed her backpack, and walked the rest of the way. The condo was in a new building, glass and steel, expensive. The kind of place where security was tight but not impossible. Emily waited across the street, watching the entrance. At 7:15, a woman emerged. Mid-40s, dark hair, sunglasses, rolling a suitcase behind her. Laura Voss. Emily's pulse kicked up. She pulled out her phone and took a photo, sent it to Frank with a single message. Confirmed. She's leaving now. Then Emily followed. Voss walked 3 blocks and hailed a cab. Emily grabbed the next one. "Follow that taxi." The driver, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, looked at her in the rear view. "You serious?" "Yes." She shrugged. "Your money." They followed Voss's cab through downtown Portland, onto the freeway, and south toward the airport. Emily's phone buzzed. "Frank, I'm 20 minutes out. Stall her." Emily leaned forward. "Faster." The driver pressed the gas. They reached the airport at 7:48. Voss's cab pulled up to the departure terminal. She paid, grabbed her suitcase, and headed inside. Emily jumped out, threw cash at the driver, and followed. The terminal was crowded. Business travelers, families, security lines snaking toward the checkpoints. Emily scanned the crowd. There. Voss was at the ticket counter, checking in. Emily moved closer, staying behind a pillar. Voss finished, took her boarding pass, and headed toward security. Emily pulled out her phone and called 911. "There's a fugitive at Portland International Airport, Laura Voss. She's wanted in connection with a federal corruption investigation. She's at the security checkpoint now." The dispatcher's voice was skeptical. "Can you describe her?" Mid-40s, dark hair, black jacket, rolling a silver suitcase. "She's checking in for a flight to Mexico City." "And your name?" "Emily Carter. I'm a witness in the federal case. Call Agent Victoria Grant at the U.S. Attorney's Office. She'll confirm." A pause. Then, "Stay on the line." Emily watched as Voss placed her suitcase on the conveyor belt and stepped through the metal detector. "Ma'am, we're dispatching airport security now. Can you keep eyes on the suspect?" "Yes." Voss collected her suitcase and headed toward the gates. Emily followed at a distance. Voss stopped at a coffee kiosk, ordered, waited. Emily stayed 20 feet back, phone to her ear. Then Voss turned and looked directly at Emily. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Voss smiled and ran. Emily dropped the phone and sprinted after her. Voss was fast. She dodged through the crowd, knocking over a stroller, shoving past an elderly couple. Emily stayed on her. Voss cut left, heading toward the restrooms. Emily followed. The restroom was empty, 3 stalls, 1 sink, no other exits. Emily drew the Glock. "It's over, Voss." Silence. Then a voice from the far stall. "You're Emily Carter." "Yeah." "The nurse who started all of this." "I didn't start it, you did." Voss laughed. "You have no idea what you've done. I took down your network, exposed your people, and now I'm taking you in. You think this ends with me? You think I'm the only one?" Emily's grip tightened on the gun. "Come out, hands up." The stall door opened. Voss stepped out, hands raised, no weapon visible. She was smaller than Emily expected, not intimidating, just a middle-aged woman in a nice jacket. "You're under arrest," Emily said. Voss smiled. "No, I'm not." She reached into her jacket. "Don't," Emily warned. But Voss pulled out her phone, pressed a button, and played a recording. Brennan's voice filled the restroom. "Carter's at the cabin. Frank Garrison's location. I'll send you the coordinates." Then Voss's voice. "Good. Make sure she doesn't leave." Emily's stomach dropped. "You think Brennan was the only one?" Voss said. "You think I didn't have insurance?" "Who else?" "Victoria Grant." Emily's blood turned to ice. "The U.S. attorney. The woman leading the federal investigation." Voss laughed at Emily's expression. "She's been on my payroll for 3 years. Every move you made, every file you found, every witness you brought forward, I knew about it because Grant told me." Emily's hands were shaking. "You're lying." "Am I? Then why hasn't she arrested me yet? Why did Monroe die in his cell? Why did Garrett resign instead of fighting? Because they were guilty. Because I let them fall. They were liabilities. But Grant? She's the one who made sure the investigation never touched me. She's the one who kept my name out of every filing. She's the reason I'm still free." Emily raised the gun higher. "Not anymore." Voss shook her head. "You won't shoot me. You're not a killer. Try me. If you shoot me, Grant will bury the case. She'll say I resisted arrest. She'll say you acted rogue. And every person we've arrested, Hendricks, Monroe, Kirby, Garrett, they'll walk." Emily's finger hovered over the trigger. Voss took a step closer. "But if you let me go, I'll give you something better. I'll give you Grant." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not going to prison. But if I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me." Behind them, the restroom door burst open. Airport security, 3 officers, guns drawn. "Drop your weapon." Emily lowered the Glock slowly, set it on the floor, raised her hands. "Laura Voss is a fugitive wanted in connection with a federal corruption case," Emily said. "Call the FBI." One of the officers approached Voss. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Voss smiled at Emily. "This isn't over." They led her away. Emily stood in the restroom, hands still raised, mind racing. If Voss was telling the truth, if Victoria Grant was dirty, then everything Emily had fought for was about to collapse. Frank arrived at the airport 30 minutes later. They released Emily into his custody after confirming her identity and her connection to the federal case. "You okay?" Frank asked. "No." "What happened?" Emily told him everything. Voss, the recording, Grant. Frank's expression darkened. "If Grant's dirty, we need proof." Voss said she'd give it to us. "You believe her?" "I don't know, but if she's right, we're screwed." Frank pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's Garrison. I need a favor. Deep background check on U.S. Attorney Victoria Grant, financial records, communications, everything." He hung up and looked at Emily. "We'll know in 48 hours. That's too long. Voss is in custody. If Grant's dirty, she'll make sure Voss doesn't talk." Then we need to talk to Voss first. They drove to the federal detention center where Voss was being held. Frank pulled strings, called in favors with people Emily didn't know, and got them a visitor slot. Voss sat across from them in an interrogation room, hands cuffed to the table. She looked tired, defeated, but her eyes were sharp. "Emily Carter," Voss said, "and Frank Garrison, the war hero. This should be interesting." "Talk," Emily said. "About what?" "Victoria Grant." Voss smiled. "You want proof?" "Yeah." "What do I get?" "Immunity," Frank said. Voss laughed. "You can't offer that." "No, but the DOJ can, and if you give us Grant, they will." Voss leaned back in her chair. "Grant's been on my payroll for 3 years. I have recordings, emails, bank transfers, everything you need to put her away." "Where?" "Safe deposit box, Bank of Portland, downtown branch." "Key?" Voss gestured to her jacket pocket. "In there." Frank pulled out the key, a small brass key with a number stamped on it. "This better not be a trick," Frank said. "It's not. Because if Grant goes down, I get my deal. And if I don't get my deal, neither do you." Emily and Frank left the detention center and drove straight to the Bank of Portland. They presented the key, showed identification, were escorted to a private room where a clerk brought them the box. Inside were USB drives, dozens of them, each one labeled with a date. Frank plugged one into his laptop, audio files, video files, documents, all of them showing Victoria Grant coordinating with Voss, dismissing cases, burying evidence, ordering Monroe's death. It was all there. Emily felt sick. The woman who was supposed to be leading the investigation had been sabotaging it from the inside. Frank closed the laptop. "We need to take this to someone we trust." "Who?" "Department of Justice, Internal Affairs, someone above Grant." "And if they're dirty too?" Frank looked at her. "Then we go public, just like you did with Garrett." They drove back to Ravenwood and uploaded the files to the same secure server Emily had used before. Then Emily drafted an email. Recipients: every major news outlet, every investigative journalist, every oversight agency. Subject: U.S. Attorney Victoria Grant and the Ravenwood cover-up. Body: attached are recordings and documents proving that U.S. Attorney Victoria Grant has been actively sabotaging the federal corruption investigation in Ravenwood. She ordered the death of Captain Gregory Monroe. She protected Deputy Mayor Simon Garrett, and she has been on the payroll of Laura Voss for 3 years. This is the proof. She attached the files and hit send. The story broke within hours. Every network ran with it. The recordings, the documents, the payments. Victoria Grant was arrested that night. Emily watched the news from Frank's safe house, Grant being led out of her office in handcuffs, her lawyer shouting no comment at reporters. The federal corruption case was reassigned to a new prosecutor, someone from Washington, someone with no ties to Ravenwood. And within a week, new indictments were issued, not just for Grant, but for 16 other officials who'd been part of the network. City councilmen, judges, police captains, lawyers, all of them arrested, all of them charged. Emily sat on Frank's couch and watched it all unfold. She'd started this 6 months ago by refusing to open a door. And now she'd dismantled an entire government, but the cost had been high. Her apartment was gone. She'd sold it and moved in with a friend temporarily. Her job at Ravenwood Memorial was compromised. Too many people blamed her for the chaos. Her trust in the system was shattered, but she was alive. And she'd won. Frank sat down beside her. "You did it." "We did it." "No, this was you, all of it." Emily didn't respond because she knew the truth. She hadn't won. Not really. She'd just survived. And in Ravenwood, that was the best anyone could hope for. 3 days later, Emily received a package. No return address. Just her name and Frank's address. Inside was a single USB drive. Emily plugged it into her laptop. One file, a video. She opened it. The screen showed a dark room, a single figure sitting in a chair. Laura Voss. "Emily Carter," Voss said, looking directly at the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I'm dead. Grant got to me. Or someone else did. Doesn't matter." Emily's hands tightened on the laptop. "You think you've won?" Voss continued. You think you've taken down the network. But you haven't. Because the network isn't Ravenwood. It's everywhere, every city, every state, people like me, people like Grant. We're just the ones who got caught. Voss leaned forward. But there's one person you haven't found yet. One person who's been above it all. The person who taught me everything. The person who built the blueprint. Emily's heart was pounding. Her name is Judge Margaret Ashford. She's been on the federal bench for 20 years, and she's been running networks like mine in 6 different cities. The screen went black. Then text appeared. Good luck, Emily. You're going to need it. The video ended. Emily stared at the screen. Judge Margaret Ashford, a federal judge, someone with more power than Voss, more connections than Grant, more protection than anyone Emily had taken down so far. Emily closed the laptop. She should have felt defeated, but she didn't. She felt ready. Because Emily Carter had learned something over the past 6 months. Justice wasn't something you got. It was something you took, and she wasn't done taking. Emily didn't tell Frank about the video right away. She sat alone in the guest room of his safe house, laptop open, staring at the frozen frame of Laura Voss's face. The woman was dead now, found in her cell 3 days after the arrest. Another apparent suicide that nobody believed. But her final message was alive. Judge Margaret Ashford. Emily pulled up everything she could find. Federal appeals court judge, 23 years on the bench, Harvard Law, impeccable reputation, awards for judicial excellence, op-eds in major newspapers about the importance of accountability. On paper, she was untouchable. But Voss had said she'd built the blueprint, had taught her everything. Emily started digging deeper. Ashford's career timeline matched perfectly with the rise of corruption networks in 6 cities: Seattle, Denver, Phoenix, Ravenwood, Portland, San Diego. Every city where Ashford had served, either as a prosecutor, defense attorney, or judge, had erupted in scandal within 5 years of her departure. It couldn't be coincidence. Emily pulled up case records from each city, buried complaints, dismissed charges, sealed settlements, and in almost every case, Ashford's name appeared somewhere in the file, as a consultant, as an expert witness, as a reviewing judge. She wasn't just connected to the networks. She was the architect who designed them, then walked away before they collapsed. Emily closed the laptop and walked into the living room where Frank was watching the news. "We need to talk," she said. Frank muted the TV. What happened? Emily told him about the video, about Ashford, about the pattern. When she finished, Frank was quiet for a long moment. "A federal judge," he finally said. "Emily, this is different. You can't just expose a federal judge like you did Garrett or Grant." "Why not?" "Because judges have protections, lifetime appointments, immunity for judicial decisions. You go after her without bulletproof evidence, she'll bury you." "Then we get bulletproof evidence." Frank shook his head. "How?" "You can't break into a federal courthouse. You can't hack her computers. Everything she does is protected by attorney-client privilege and judicial confidentiality." "There's always a way." "Not this time. Ashford's too smart. If she's really been running this for 20 years, she's covered every angle." Emily sat down on the couch. "So what do we do? Let her get away with it?" "We wait. We build a case the right way. We work with the DOJ, get subpoenas, bring in investigators, and she disappears, just like Voss tried to." Frank didn't have an answer for that. Emily pulled out her phone and started making a list. Everything she knew about Ashford, every case, every connection, every city where a network had collapsed. There had to be something, a thread she could pull, a witness who'd talk. And then she found it. A lawsuit from 7 years ago, filed in Seattle. A woman named Rachel Ortega had accused a city councilman of sexual assault. The case had been dismissed. The councilman had later been found dead of an overdose. The dismissal had been signed by Judge Margaret Ashford. Emily pulled up Rachel Ortega's current information, still living in Seattle, working as a paralegal at a small firm. Emily called her. The phone rang 4 times before a cautious voice answered. "Hello? Rachel Ortega? Who's asking?" "My name is Emily Carter. I'm calling about your case from 7 years ago, the one against Councilman David Werner." Silence. Then, I don't talk about that. I understand, but I think the judge who dismissed your case is part of a larger corruption network, and I need your help proving it. Well, why should I trust you? Because I've already taken down 16 people who were part of the same network, and I'm not stopping until I get all of them. Another long pause. What do you need? Rachel asked. Emily flew to Seattle the next day. Frank insisted on coming with her, along with Hale for additional security. They met Rachel at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. She was in her mid-30s, guarded eyes, the look of someone who'd been through hell and learned not to trust easy answers. Tell me about your case, Emily said. Rachel stirred her coffee. Werner assaulted me at a fundraiser. I reported it, filed charges, had witnesses, had evidence. What happened? Judge Ashford dismissed it, said the evidence was inadmissible, said my testimony wasn't credible. She didn't even hold a hearing, just signed an order, and that was it. But did she give a reason? She said the witnesses were unreliable, that the timeline didn't match, but it was all there. My lawyer said it was the strongest case he'd seen in years. Where's your lawyer now? Rachel's expression darkened. Dead. Car accident 2 months after the dismissal. Emily's chest tightened. Convenient. I thought so too, but when I tried to file a complaint, it went nowhere. The Bar Association said there was no evidence of misconduct. The Judicial Review Board said Ashford's decision was within her discretion. What about Werner? Overdose. 6 months later. His family said he'd been depressed, but I never believed it. You think Ashford had him killed? Rachel looked at Emily. I think Ashford protects people until they become liabilities, and then she makes them disappear. Emily pulled out her laptop and showed Rachel the files she'd compiled. The pattern, the cities, the cases. Rachel went pale. This is bigger than I thought. Yeah, and I need you to testify. No. Rachel, I said no. I tried that once. It destroyed my life. I'm not doing it again. Emily leaned forward. I understand you're scared, but if you don't speak up, Ashford keeps operating. She protects more abusers. She buries more victims. That's not my problem. It is if you can live with it. Rachel's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're asking. I do. Because I've been where you are. Someone came to my door and tried to intimidate me into silence. And I could have opened that door, could have let him win. But I didn't. And because of that, 16 people are in prison. Rachel looked away. I have a daughter now. She's 5. If I testify and something happens to me, I'll make sure you're protected. Federal witness protection, new identity, whatever you need. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise that if you don't speak up, Ashford will do this to someone else. And that person might not be as strong as you. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. What do you need me to do? Over the next 3 days, Emily and Rachel built a case. Rachel provided her original court filings, photos of her injuries, text messages from Werner, statements from witnesses who'd been intimidated into silence. Emily cross-referenced it with the other cases Ashford had dismissed. The pattern was undeniable. Every case involved powerful men accused by women with credible evidence. Every dismissal came without a hearing, and in almost every case, the accused either paid a settlement or ended up dead. Ashford wasn't just protecting abusers, she was running an extortion racket. Emily compiled everything into a single file and sent it to the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, the division that investigates federal judges. Then she waited. 2 days later, she got a call from an investigator named Marcus Delgado. Ms. Carter, I've reviewed your submission. This is serious. I know. But it's also complicated. Judge Ashford has been on the bench for over 2 decades. She has friends at every level of government. If we move on this without ironclad proof, it'll blow up in our faces. I have proof. Rachel Ortega is willing to testify. I have case files from 6 different cities showing the same pattern. That's circumstantial. We need direct evidence, communications, financial records, something that shows Ashford actively coordinating with these networks. How do I get that? Delgado was quiet for a moment. You don't. We do. And it's going to take time. How much time? Months, maybe a year. Emily's grip tightened on the phone. She'll be gone by then. Possibly, but if we rush this and lose, she gets to stay on the bench. And everyone you've already taken down gets their convictions overturned. Emily hung up and stared at the wall. Delgado was right. Going after a federal judge required more than evidence. It required perfection. But Emily didn't have a year, because 2 days later Rachel called her. "Someone's following me." Emily's stomach dropped. "Where are you?" "At home. There's a car outside. It's been there for 3 hours." "Did you call the police?" "They said they'd send someone. But Emily, I'm scared." "Lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone. I'm calling Frank." Emily hung up and immediately dialed Frank. "Rachel's being watched. Seattle. We need to get her out." Frank didn't hesitate. "I'll send Hale and Cooper. They can be there in 4 hours." "That's too long." "It's the best I can do." Emily booked a flight to Seattle, left within the hour. By the time she landed, it was too late. Rachel was gone. Not dead, just gone. Her apartment was empty, her phone disconnected. Her daughter pulled from school. Emily stood in the empty living room and felt the rage build. Ashford had gotten to her. Frank arrived 6 hours later. "Any sign of her?" "No, but I know where she is." "Where?" "Witness protection. Ashford's people must have offered her a deal. Relocate." "Change your name. Stay quiet." "You think Rachel took it?" "Wouldn't you? She's got a kid. Someone's threatening her. Ashford offers safety in exchange for silence." Frank ran a hand through his hair. "So we're back to square one." "No, we're not." Emily pulled out her laptop and opened the files she'd compiled on Ashford. "Rachel was the witness, but I don't need her testimony. I need Ashford's." "What are you talking about?" "Ashford's been operating for 20 years. That means she's confident, arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes." Emily started searching through Ashford's public appearances, speeches, interviews, panel discussions, and then she found it. A symposium on judicial ethics held 3 years ago at Georgetown Law. Ashford had been a panelist. The entire event had been recorded and uploaded to YouTube. Emily watched it twice. In the Q&A section, a law student asked Ashford about dismissed cases and judicial discretion. Ashford's response was careful, measured, but there was a moment, just a flicker, where she smiled and said, "Sometimes the best way to serve justice is to recognize when a case will do more harm than good." Emily rewound the video and watched it again. More harm than good. That was Ashford's justification for burying cases. Emily pulled up the transcripts from every case Ashford had dismissed, and in almost every ruling, the same phrase appeared. "This case will do more harm than good." It was her signature. Emily spent the next week building a presentation. Every dismissed case, every instance of the phrase, every connection to corruption networks in 6 cities. Then she did something risky. She reached out to a journalist. Not just any journalist. Carla Mendez, investigative reporter for the Washington Post, Pulitzer Prize winner, known for taking down corrupt officials. Emily sent her the files with a single message. "Judge Margaret Ashford has been running corruption networks for 20 years. I have proof. Are you interested?" Carla responded within an hour. "Let's talk." They met in Washington, D.C. at a hotel bar near the Capitol. Carla was mid-50s, sharp eyes, the kind of person who'd seen every lie and learned to spot them instantly. "Show me what you have," Carla said. Emily pulled out her laptop and walked her through it. The cities, the cases, the pattern, the phrase. When she finished, Carla leaned back in her chair. "This is explosive." "I know, but it's also dangerous. Ashford has friends everywhere. If I publish this and it falls apart, it won't. I've spent 6 months taking down an entire corruption network. I know how to build a case." Carla studied her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone has to." That's not an answer. Emily met her eyes. "Because 6 months ago, someone tried to intimidate me into silence, and I refused. And because of that, 17 people are in prison. But Ashford's still free, still operating, still destroying lives, and I'm not going to let her get away with it." Carla nodded slowly. "I'll need to verify everything. Talk to sources. Get independent confirmation." "How long?" 2 weeks? Maybe 3. "Make it 1. Carla smiled. "You're pushy." "I learned from the best." Carla published the story 10 days later. Front page of the Washington Post. Headline, Federal judge accused of running multi-city corruption network. The article laid it all out. The cities, the cases, the pattern, the phrase. Interviews with victims who'd been silenced, financial records showing connections between Ashford and the networks. It was devastating. Within hours, the story went viral. Every news network picked it up. Social media exploded. Legal analysts dissected every detail. And Judge Margaret Ashford gave a press conference. She stood in front of the federal courthouse, flanked by lawyers, and read from a prepared statement. These allegations are baseless and defamatory. I have dedicated my life to upholding the law. I will not be intimidated by conspiracy theories and character assassination. But her voice was shaking. And 2 days later, the House Judiciary Committee announced they were opening an impeachment inquiry. Emily watched it all from Frank's safe house in Ravenwood. The hearings started 3 weeks later. Emily testified on the first day. She walked into the committee room wearing a simple blazer and slacks, no makeup, hair pulled back. She looked like exactly what she was, a nurse who'd fought back. The chairman, a silver-haired congressman from Ohio, swore her in. Ms. Carter, thank you for being here. Can you tell us in your own words what led you to investigate Judge Ashford? Emily took a breath. 6 months ago, a corrupt police officer came to my door and tried to intimidate me. I refused to let him in, and that decision led me to uncover a network of corruption that spanned an entire city. But when I started digging deeper, I realized the network wasn't isolated. It existed in 6 different cities, and every single one had been touched by Judge Margaret Ashford. She spent the next 2 hours walking them through it. The cases, the dismissals, the pattern, the victims. When she finished, the room was silent. Then the ranking member, a congresswoman from California, leaned forward. Ms. Carter, you've accused a sitting federal judge of serious crimes. Are you prepared to face the consequences if you're wrong? Emily met her eyes. I'm not wrong. How can you be sure? Because I've been living the consequences for 6 months. I've had my tires slashed, my locker vandalized, my life threatened. I've been hunted by dirty cops and corrupt officials. And through it all, I kept digging, because that's what you do when you know the truth. The congresswoman nodded slowly. Thank you, Ms. Carter. Over the next 2 weeks, more witnesses testified. Rachel Ortega, who'd been found in witness protection and convinced to speak, told her story. Former prosecutors testified about cases Ashford had buried. Financial experts showed the money trail connecting Ashford to the networks. And on the 15th day, Ashford herself took the stand. Emily sat in the gallery and watched. Ashford was calm, composed. She answered every question with precision, denying everything. I have never coordinated with any corrupt official. I have never accepted bribes. I have never ordered anyone's death. But when the chairman asked her about the phrase, more harm than good, Ashford hesitated, just for a second, and Emily saw it, the crack in the armor. Judge Ashford, the chairman said, you've used that exact phrase in 47 different rulings over the past 15 years. Can you explain why? Ashford's jaw tightened. It's a standard legal principle. Sometimes pursuing a case causes more damage to the victim than letting it go. But in almost every case where you use that phrase, the accused was later connected to corruption networks. How do you explain that? Coincidence? 47 times. Ashford didn't answer. The vote came 2 days later. The House Judiciary Committee voted 23-12 to recommend impeachment. The full House voted 3 weeks after that, 287-148 in favor. Judge Margaret Ashford was impeached. The Senate trial started a month later. Emily didn't testify this time. She'd done her part. Now it was up to the senators. The trial lasted 6 days. On the 7th day, the Senate voted 67-33 to convict. Judge Margaret Ashford was removed from the bench. And 3 hours later, federal marshals arrested her on charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. Emily watched the arrest on the news from a small apartment she'd rented in Portland. She'd left Ravenwood for good. Too many ghosts. Too many memories. Frank had helped her relocate, found her a job at a hospital in Portland, set her up with a new start. But Emily knew she'd never truly leave it behind, because what she'd learned over the past 6 months would stay with her forever. The door, the choice, the refusal to be silent. 6 months after Ashford's conviction, Emily stood in a courtroom in Seattle, not as a defendant, not as a witness, as an advocate. Rachel Ortega had decided to refile her case against the estate of Councilman Werner, and she'd asked Emily to be there. The judge, a new appointee, young and idealistic, listened to Rachel's testimony, reviewed the evidence, and issued a ruling in favor of Rachel. A settlement of $2.3 million, an official apology from the city, and a commitment to reform how sexual assault cases were handled. After the hearing, Rachel hugged Emily in the hallway. "Thank you," Rachel said, crying. "You did this, not me." "No, you showed me it was possible," Emily smiled. "Then pay it forward." 3 months later, Emily received an invitation. The Department of Justice was holding a ceremony to honor whistleblowers who'd exposed corruption. Emily's name was on the list. She almost didn't go, but Frank convinced her. "You earned this," he said. "Don't run from it." The ceremony was held in Washington, D.C. at the DOJ headquarters. Hundreds of people attended: journalists, advocates, survivors. Emily stood on the stage alongside 6 other whistleblowers and listened as the Attorney General spoke. These individuals risked everything to expose corruption. They faced threats, intimidation, violence, but they refused to be silenced, and because of their courage, justice prevailed. Emily received a plaque, a handshake, applause, but the moment that mattered came after the ceremony. A woman approached her, mid-20s, nervous. "Ms. Carter, I'm Amanda Ross. I work at a hospital in Denver, and I think my supervisor is covering up medical malpractice." Emily looked at her. "You have evidence?" "Some, but I'm scared. If I speak up, you'll face consequences. People will come after you. Your life will get harder." Amanda's face fell. "So I shouldn't do it?" Emily smiled. "I didn't say that. I said it'll be hard. But if you've got the evidence and you've got the courage, you can win." "How do you know?" "Because I did." Amanda nodded slowly. "Will you help me?" Emily thought about it. She'd spent 6 months fighting, surviving, winning, and now someone was asking her to do it again. She could say no, could walk away, could live a quiet life in Portland and never look back. But that wasn't who she was anymore. "Yeah," Emily said, "I'll help you." Over the next year, Emily became something she'd never planned to be: an advocate. She helped Amanda expose the malpractice cover-up in Denver, testified at hearings, connected her with journalists and lawyers. And when Amanda won her case, 3 other people reached out. Then 10. Then 50. People who'd been silenced, intimidated, told their stories didn't matter. Emily couldn't help all of them, but she helped as many as she could. She started a nonprofit, called it the Carter Standard, named after the protocol she'd created at Ravenwood Memorial. The organization provided legal support, media training, and protection for whistleblowers who were exposing corruption. Frank ran security. Marcus Webb, her old paramedic colleague, handled logistics. And Rachel Ortega became the lead advocate for survivors of sexual violence. Within 2 years, the Carter Standard had helped expose corruption in 12 cities, brought down 34 officials, and changed policies in 8 states. Emily didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she knew what it felt like to stand alone at a door and have to decide whether to open it or fight back. And she wanted to make sure no one else had to make that choice alone. 5 years after the night Reeves came to her door, Emily stood in front of a Senate committee. Not as a witness this time, as an expert. They were drafting new federal legislation to protect whistleblowers, and they'd invited Emily to testify about what needed to change. She walked into the committee room wearing the same blazer she'd worn 5 years ago. A little worn now, a little faded, but still hers. The chairman smiled when he saw her. "Ms. Carter, welcome back." "Thank you, Senator." "You've been busy since we last saw you." "I've been fighting, and winning, from what I understand." Emily nodded. "Sometimes, not always." "What would you say to someone who's thinking about becoming a whistleblower but is afraid of the consequences?" Emily took a breath. "I'd say the consequences are real. You will face retaliation. You will lose things you care about. People will come after you, and the system will fight to protect itself. But that's not very encouraging." "No, but here's the thing. If you don't speak up, the corruption continues. The abuse continues. The people in power keep winning, and you have to live with that." "So what do you do?" Emily looked directly at the camera filming the hearing. You trust yourself. You document everything. You find people who believe you, and you refuse to be silent, because silence protects predators. And your voice, one person's voice, can bring down an entire system. You really believe that? Emily smiled. I know it, because I've done it. The legislation passed 6 months later. The Whistleblower Protection and Accountability Act. It provided federal protection for anyone who exposed corruption, mandatory investigations, criminal penalties for retaliation, and funding for organizations like the Carter Standard. On the day it was signed into law, Emily stood in the Rose Garden alongside the other advocates who'd fought for it. The president shook her hand. You've changed the system, Ms. Carter. No, sir. I just refuse to let it break me. That night, Emily returned to her apartment in Portland. Small, quiet, nothing fancy. She made coffee, sat on the couch, and looked at the door. The same door she'd reinforced 5 years ago. Triple locks, deadbolt, security bar. She didn't need them anymore. The threats had stopped years ago, but she kept them anyway, because they reminded her of the night everything changed, the night she chose to fight instead of surrender. Her phone buzzed, a text from Frank. Saw you on the news, you looked good. Emily smiled and typed back. Thanks. How's the team? Good. Martinez is training new recruits. Hale's running operations in Seattle. Cooper's teaching tactical courses. And you? Thinking about retirement. Maybe buy a cabin, somewhere quiet. Emily laughed. You'd be bored in a week. Probably. But it's nice to think about. Another text came through, this one from Rachel. Just won another case. Woman in Phoenix. Wrongful termination. Settlement plus policy changes. Thought you'd want to know. Emily's chest swelled with pride. That's incredible. Tell her congratulations from me. I will. None of this happens without you, Em. Emily set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. She'd started this journey as a nurse. Someone invisible. Someone people dismissed. She'd been called difficult, pushy, reckless. But she'd refused to be silent. And because of that, 34 corrupt officials were in prison. 12 cities had reformed their policies, and hundreds of people who'd been voiceless now had someone fighting for them. It wasn't perfect. Emily still had nightmares, still looked over her shoulder, still struggled with trust. But she'd survived, and she'd won. Not because she was fearless, but because she was afraid and did it anyway. Emily walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, someone was standing at their own door, hearing threats, facing a choice. Open the door and surrender, or shut it and fight. Emily hoped they'd choose to fight, because she'd proven it was possible. One nurse, one door, one refusal, and an entire system brought to its knees. That was the power of saying no. That was the power of one voice. And Emily Carter would spend the rest of her life making sure no one ever had to use that voice alone. She turned away from the window, locked the door one more time, and smiled. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in 5 years, Emily wasn't afraid of it. She was ready.